David, I invited you to this conversation because I believe, and I have observed, that you care about the same things that I care about, which is a new society, a new world, the changing expressions and identity of both men and women. Now, I'm so tired in the esoteric field of hearing that, we're the same. We're not the same. As a soul, yes, of course. But we're not here as souls. We're here as people, in personalities, in a body, and moving in this very concrete material world. And there are different ways in which we perceive, in which we feel our interests, even though we have been to the same schools, educated in the same way, have the same professions. So I've asked you because I have heard and seen that you are concerned with the growing authenticity of men and their need to redefine themselves, especially their priorities. And this is what I'm trying to do with women, with the whole movement of the inner woman, of the feminine mystery school. And so my question was, what is going on with men? What is it, and what is it like being a man? I mean, something we just can't know. So.
Wow, this is quite a responsibility. So first, thank you for the invitation to be here. Upon receiving the invitation, I felt a huge responsibility on behalf of my gender, but also a bit of being absolved of responsibility, because whether I as a man or you as a woman or anyone out there with whatever gender you are, we have to speak for our own personal experience and our own personal responsibility. So at the end of all of this, whether it is a woman seeking her authentic inner self or a man searching for purpose in his authentic self, our own personal responsibility is the primary shift that I'm looking for. It just so happens that a focus of my work and my personal relationship to men, being a man, brings a deeper connection and personal relationship to that. How can men apply personal responsibility to our actions in our lives, and where do we look for that? And so this search and this investigation came to me, I guess, first around late 1990s, early 2000s, when I was living in San Francisco. And I was doing some transformational courses there, and was pointed towards a men's circle that was meeting every week on Ocean Beach in San Francisco. And the focus of the men's circle there was living, or discovering and living, a life of purpose. Mm-hmm. And at that point, where was I, in the upper 20s, early 30s at this point, and I had professional direction. I was raised in a family that pointed me in a certain direction, but on a deeper layer, I was a bit lost. Mm-hmm. And the work of purpose, as it came to me through this circle and through relating to men in a deeper conversation, has evolved and grown into where it is today. So the purpose work that I feel most connected to, I feel it is a man's banks of the river. Because we as spiritual beings are in the flow of life, what unfolds, what comes to us we have to deal with. And whether we approach it purely from an emotional or an intellectual perspective, help us to deal with life's turns.
It's interesting that you use the word purpose, being a man, and we use the word authenticity. We're so concerned with being true to ourselves. It's almost like that impulse, you know, the directional impulse which marks the male gender. And there's more englobing, surrounding, occupying space, expansive aspect of women. And the problem for me comes in with the emotional relationships. Not just man-woman, but man-son, father, brother, co-workers, colleagues, how it is being expressed in business and professional world. It's almost like you can tell when it's a woman architect, the way the house is designed and what the conveniences are, no matter how talented or even gay the guy may be, it doesn't matter, because the gender works right through your sexual preference. It's a matter of perception and expression. How do you see that?
I see it as cooperation and competition. These forces at play here, and this is where it could get very esoteric and philosophical. And I think for both of our sake, it's good when it doesn't. Are we born as men competitive or cooperative? And although they are two quite different forces, I think that they can function together. And what you might be referring to in the emotional realm is that as a man, I tend to approach things more from a competitive perspective, which would mean a rational, logical approach to succeeding, exceeding, or winning, which I believe is probably different than a woman who may approach things from a cooperative, how can we collaborate and do something together this way.
Well, there is also the impulse in a woman to be different and to be unique and to be special. That's part of her emotional baggage, let's say. But I would not say that we are competitive. I would say that we have learned to be competitive in schools. We have learned part of the modern survival process, especially with all this equality and equality of appearance, I would say, because the equality is of difference, not of the sameness. In any event, we are more feeling cooperative. Yes, there's a lot of leadership in women, but it expresses itself in a different way. It comes in, let's say it's persuasive rather than convincing. It's more of an air that we put out.
Yes. I'm thinking of my experience of that, and I would definitely agree to that in this persuasive, if I could throw the bomb in there, manipulative word. That's also a piece of it that men also use. I also use. I know I can't speak for almost half of the gender of humanity, but using manipulation tools to earn or to get the things that we want, and making a circle back to the emotional piece is when I am using manipulation and tools that I can use to get what I want, it's to gain some type of emotional gratification, because expressing my emotions is not familiar territory to me, and I think to most men. So we find different ways to get the rush and the sensation of emotion, and we could probably say the more positively attributed ones. I want to succeed, I want to be recognized, I want to feel worthy, I want to feel proud of my accomplishments.
Now, is this what you call emotional?
No, because I realized as I was saying that the emotions would be happy, joyful. Those are emotions that I get when those logistical things happen. When I get that.
How about the relationship of emotion and sensitivity? most often women confuse men not being emotional with men not being sensitive. Now, our sensitivity, pardon, as an example, our sensitivity is always all over the place, whether a woman realizes it or not. It's like we're capable, we have antennae from our energetic anatomy that is different from the energetic anatomy of the man. So we have these antennae and we're constantly aware of things that are happening subliminally. I don't think most men, I've known men who do, most men are operating that way. And so the emotions for us part from this sensitivity and not so much feeling good or happy, which has a purpose and a direction. It's
Yes.
Emotions are a feeling, being state of sensitivity.
Yes, yeah, I agree with you on the differentiation between those two, and clearly with exceptions to all of these, that most of the men that I know are sensitive to a fair range of external experiences, and we feel the emotions. I personally don't believe we feel them as intensely as women do. I feel like we have the emotion and we get the rush, but unsure of how or where to express them, with a layer of fear on the top, of looking good, of the conditioning of being a man, of not wanting to cause problems, or on the flip side of always being the angry one, always being the one to cause a scene,
Right.
because he's uncomfortable with dealing with the emotions on the inside. So there's the two extremes, that there's the one man who has the emotions but doesn't express them for fear of what he might look like or what might be perceived. And there's the one who does tend to express himself but is afraid to know the root of those emotions.
Now, I seem to have picked up a little bit here when you were talking about for fear of the expression, the stop, you know, like the wall between the feeling or the emotion and its expression.
Yes.
Do you need to know what you're feeling and define it mentally before you can express it? Is this where the problem might be? Because we don't usually think. Our thinking, which we can talk about in a minute, is very different.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing that you picked up on. I've never thought of it that way, or even looked at it this way, that to be able to identify it before expressing it. I feel that when I have some emotion, it's fairly clear to me what it is. And in the expression, I have a strong filter on it, because I have needs of looking good, and these are some of my issues in terms of expressing myself and not causing waves or rocking the boat, so to speak. So I don't think that there needs to be an identity of the emotion. I would say more of a freedom of expression of that emotion, to be able for a man to let it go. But it's like a muscle, and when it's untrained, we're not sure how to deal with it, especially in terms of anger and frustration that too often comes out as violence.
Okay.
And I see a clear distinction between being angry, being pissed off, and being frustrated and expressing it, and acting violently.
Right. Okay, yes, that's a really important point. What I was thinking now was in terms of the expression of emotion goes through a very physical, which is the other polarity, where men are stronger than women. We care about physical things and appearances, perhaps a little bit more, in a different way. But you guys always translate everything into physical. Everything becomes physical. The emotion becomes physical. The thought becomes physical. whereas women are a bit different this way. So how would you relate to that?
This is a big piece of the work that has brought the two of us together in this conversation, and working with men's circles and men together to find ways to feel the emotion and embody it as a form of expression. And this is why I feel that men working together with just men, because once there is one woman in the space, we behave differently, as potentially you all do as well.
Yes, definitely.
So men getting together in a safe place, but at the same time it needs an experienced guide. As most spiritual experiences, or any, we could even say a martial art or something like this, requires that when there is someone there that has the experience to guide a man into the sensory feeling of emotion, to the vibration of it. Where is it? What does it look like? Can you describe it in the way that you feel it? And then having a space to physically express it. Because yes, we do as men want and need to have some way to use the body to manifest it. Because otherwise it's very elusive to us. Mm-hmm. And from the male perspective, we like to have things that we can touch and feel and sense in the physical plane.
Again,
so
this keyword purpose.
Yes, the purpose also,
yeah.
that can come back there. But where the emotion is, to have a chance to let it become embodied and express itself. Mm-hmm. Because I feel that a woman might have more capacity, more ability to feel it and express it without needing to package it somehow to put it out into the world.
I think we have more holding power. We're used to hold, because
yeah.
Everything is emotional for us. This is something that not even women understand today. Everything affects us emotionally. Whether we're aware of it as emotion or not, there's a movement, there's an energetic response or resonance, as you were saying.
But do you feel that we as men don't have everything as an emotional response?
I think it goes so immediately, so quickly to the mind and to the need to lead, to have a purpose, to define. I mean, this is, it's a bit stereotyped, but for me it continues being very, very basic distinction between the genders. You guys are leading the world. I mean, we are also leaders, but you guys are defining it. You guys have a knack for setting order and system that we do not. We have a haphazard, everything, our thoughts are all at the same time. This is difficult to describe. And we do not follow, drives you guys crazy. We do not follow a logical line. We're going like dun 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 simultaneously, like a little robot. Not quite robotic, but there's not that much consciousness in our responses that are triggered by this resonance, which I'm also calling emotion.
Yes. Which is where I see the mutual responsibility at play here.
Yes.
Because there is a time and a place for structure and order in this material world where we live, to follow schedules, to have the political, economic structures that are currently in radical disarray, but possibly with some male, masculine, logistical approach, be reordered. But at the same time, when emotion is not brought into it, this is why we're in this chaotic situation.
Of course, yes.
Because I'm in relationship now with my wife for 10 years, and what I had previously thought was my emotional maturity was infantile. It was very childish and cliche, and what in being in a committed relationship with a radically expressive woman has taught me in my emotional realm has actually supported my ability to guide and to lead, because I then can also bring the emotional piece into it.
Okay.
That in sensing the space, in seeing and perceiving what's going on in people, then my natural tendency to create order and structure and linear direction can take into consideration the...
Is enhanced.
Yes,
absolutely.
is enhanced.
Yeah. Now, there's something that I don't want to miss talking about with you, and that is the connection between emotions or being, state of being. We can perhaps skim a little bit over the subject of emotion at the moment. Spirituality. What is spirituality for you guys? For me, for example, all of these methods, and I've struggled with this because I'm teaching women, they are so male. All the spiritual techniques require stilling the mind, and you will never, ever find a woman with a still mind. And yet you will find enlightened women. They are based on technique. They're based on these incredible, ridiculous to me, diets, you know, the rules, you know, and all of this stuff, which works well. It works because I've done them. I've done them. I lived many years in India, and I did everything, almost. But they don't suit the woman's experience and her path, her spiritual path. So talk a little bit about spirituality for men and how, modern men in particular.
Okay. In this approach, for modern men looking at spirituality, I think the first question is important: what is spirituality? And from my perspective, it's knowledge of self on a very deep layer of the essence of who I am beyond my male body, beyond my masculine presence. As an experience of an energy being. But this is very far beyond logical thought processes, which is why it's challenging for men to look beyond what we can rationalize. And so religion has attempted to do this, but again it put a very big box around something that is so far beyond the box. That in knowing God, for lack of a better term, outside of the religious form of God, essence, spirit...
Absolute.
Absolute is a beautiful way to refer to it. In knowing absolute, there needs to be an approach for us to communicate about it in the material world. So in this way, technique, practices, lineages offer men something that we can hold, a ladder to climb up, so that eventually we can let go of it.
And you are a yoga instructor, and you're a very successful one, and masses of women are working with you and love you. How does yoga, which is a system, and a very rigorous one, fall into this new definition of reaching the self? And if you can talk a little bit for women, the way you perceive us.
Yes, I've been practicing yoga now for 24 years and teaching for almost 18, and my practices have shifted along the way. In what I now refer to as modern postural yoga, which is the Instagram, the social media, physical aspect of poses and breathing techniques as a tool. And it's very often confused as the whole pie when it is one slice of the pie. Because the entirety of the practice of yoga includes the postures, but it is a philosophy, it is a lifestyle approach. It includes freedom, it includes radical self-expression, But that part is often ignored because we want to see the great poses and the physical benefits.
Okay.
So I have seen the physical part as a stepping stone. And I believe this is why there are two sides to the coin of the growth of yoga. That the negative side is that it's become a physical exercise and lost the essence of self-realization. And through its expansion, when women or men become more established in our physical bodies, we can feel more emotions.
You can sustain the better.
We can sustain
Yeah.
we can even, I would argue, release emotional tension that is stored in physical tissue.
Okay.
This would where we could go esoteric and have a deeper conversation about it, but I believe that we can store the vibrations of emotions in the physical body, and through dance, yoga practices, different things to release them, then we feel and in turn express them.
Okay.
So yoga can be taught as a physical practice. Move your body this way, engage your muscles, breathe in this technique, I leave you there. Or with a courageous and experienced teacher, there can be the opportunity to use the physical practices to create some emotional response, which is a gateway into the spirit.
How do you integrate this with your, I imagine your groups are mixed, men, women.
Mostly, yes.
How do you integrate this and the gender issue, the gender difference? How does it appear to you?
Because I don't bring it up so much in the teaching, because I want, everyone's coming with their own level of physical, emotional, mental aptitude. Personally, when I teach, I want to approach all four pieces of this: the body, the emotion, the intellect, and the spirit. And I don't draw much of a distinction and call out these differences so much in the teaching, unless I'm working with a gender-specific group, which means I'm only working with men, because I never lead women's only things unless it's by chance, which unfortunately happens too often, because I find that men are intimidated by the practice of yoga. I talked before about competition. A man in his pride to show up in a room full of women in stretchy pants who can do something better than he can, physically, is a punch in the gut to a man's ego. It's valuable and important that we do this, men, that we show up in those classes and do that and humble ourselves. Many men are afraid to open the doors of spirituality and emotion.
Yes.
I think this is a conditioned pattern. I don't believe that this is an inherent thing.
Okay.
That I think this is part of modern conditioning. That a man, through everything he's gone through of defining himself from his early years, through whatever conditions come from the parents, through defining himself through puberty, with his physical appearance, with sexual preference, identity, which shows up in a full spectrum, professionally, how to fit himself, and again coming back to purpose, and how a man can direct himself through purpose, often ignores the emotional and the spiritual side of it when it's looked at as success. When we can reframe purpose as inclusive of emotional and spiritual development,
Okay.
rather than just physical and intellectual development,
Right.
then purpose becomes really exciting and fits to women and to men.
Okay. I still think for women it is very limiting to be given a set of rules, because we're also very obedient. I mean, it's been so conditioned into us to please the man, to thinking that we need protection, thinking that we cannot survive on our own. And so to follow rules is very simple. And yet our needs, our experience of ourselves, if we allow ourselves, because there's nobody holding us back now but the conditioning of the past, these beliefs which are weighing really strongly, I think both on men and women. But perhaps, maybe that's just because I'm a female, perhaps most on women, limit us tremendously from being ourselves, exploring. Again, I come back to my key word, which is authenticity.
Yes. So, do you have, how do you discover authenticity without a technique?
Through emotion.
Okay.
This is feminine mysteries path. I have the School of Inner Alchemy, and which is where our friend, mutual friend is, and all the other men. And then there's a feminine mysteries. I approach the same end through direct emotional, almost like irrational experience, and then let's look at what happened. Let's look at what we feel afterwards. But a woman-only group is a whole different experience. I mean, everything is happening simultaneously. It's hard to explain.
Yeah, because here I see the paradigm that, because I would argue that there is even, okay, there is a technique to feel emotion in order to be authentic. But emotion is beyond the realm of technique.
For example, in the first stages, because there's three basic levels in feminine mysteries. Just very briefly, because it's not to talk about this here right now, but I induce an experience through a story which is not just heard, but I force them, invite them, would be a nicer term, actually I force them, into dramatizing that story.
Yes.
And in dramatizing that story, you make it yours. So you go through all of those experiences, even though they may not have been an experience of your own life. They're in the female psyche. They're all around you. I mean, especially when you watch TV, series, etc., drama, all over the place. The moment you make it yours, then you begin to, then intelligence, female intelligence, awakens when you are feeling something intensely, not necessarily an emotion, the resonance. Then the intelligence arises. What does this remind me of? And then perhaps the sense of purpose comes in. What is going on here? How do I respond? And women are very, very, I would even say we're very selfish, perhaps, in a different way than men, but I'm facing that all the time. They think of me, and perhaps in fifth place, you. I'm the center of the universe and you've got to give me attention. So this way of experiencing a story, archetypical story or whatever is being presented, gives them the opportunity of the me, and through the me discover the you, and the they, and the it. Yeah. So that's it. But I had a question that I'm not quite able to remember right now about, yes, the problem that I'm having also. I think we all have this right now, which you mentioned a little while back. And it is a problem because I love working with men, because as a matter of fact I miss it. I miss the intellectual challenge. I miss the tension. I miss the difference that makes us grow and stimulate one another. What happens with women is beautiful. And more than beautiful, it is also very stimulating, because a woman, nothing gets past her. Men, we believe is a little bit different.
Yeah.
So, but the groups. I'm going to do a mixed group, and there's 3 men and 20 women.
Mhm.
Oh, please, men, please come to the groups. We want to hear about you. And this is perhaps why I'm also led to interview men and find out what is going on. How can we? I know we need to work separately,
Mhm.
but how can we come together in a group setup where we can discuss openly, without these inhibitions, without these fears, without this competition or this need to please and be what I think you need of me, etc.
Mhm. Mhm. I also see the paradigm in this, that even calling men out as a challenge to step into his emotional and spiritual self. And it might seem a bit like the cat chasing his tail. We want to not play into the stereotype of competition and challenge, but that might be a way to open the door. Okay, man. Rather, so you've proven yourself as a success in the business world. You have these financial things. You have these, material things. But can you honestly say that you are emotionally in tune with yourself? I don't even want to say emotionally happy, because what if he's emotionally sad in this moment?
Yeah, right.
And this is part of it. We want to feel the full spectrum of
Exactly.
emotion. So I have used a little bit of an approach of calling it up as a challenge. Okay, man, who's ready for this? Which of you are ready to open up the doors to your heart, knowing that if you want to experience deep, passionate, connecting love, you also must be ready for very strong, intense anger and frustration. That if you limit yourself in your anger, you also limit yourself in love. I believe that they move exponentially outward. And
when you take the meaning away, it's pure energy.
Correct. And this is something that could point the conversation in a little different direction, that when emotion is expressed from a woman to a man, how for us not to take it as an attack against ourselves, how to receive it. I use the analogy often as the emotional experience of a woman is like the ocean, and as men we can be the beach. And we sometimes it's like Playa Estrenque in Mallorca, where the beaches are very soft and sweet, and sometimes it's Hurricane Katrina that crashes the waves. But nonetheless, we as the men can hold space for the emotional response without being swept away into it. And this is where I see, much like muscular conditioning, emotional conditioning. And if with our partners and with mixed groups, men can have the experience of, okay, let's set a clear foundation here. We are, if it's with your partner, we are in love with each other. We have this clarity between us that I want to express myself, I want you to be free to express yourself without feeling it as a personal attack. It's an emotional release. And how can we as men train ourselves to not take everything so personally?
This is a little bit of a parenthesis, and I think you made your point well. But this is a bit of a parenthesis because I'm experiencing in my interview here with you, or in our meeting I prefer to say, is that I'm coming off quite strong emotionally, and you are so gentle. I was expecting you to be different, and it's a beauty.
It's the camera.
No, there's, and I know that you have a strong masculinity and all this. I mean in every sense. And yet the dominant emotional force here is I'm very aware that it is me, and I'm aware that I'm influencing you. Are you aware of this in the same way that I am? And you're not defensive.
Yeah.
Which is, thank you, good. Which is a sign for me of the inner man, of the man. You've incorporated what the inner man is, or what the new man is, which is what I want to talk about next.
Okay.
You've incorporated that posture, that inner posture. So you're not in a defensive, which would be most men. I'm a very strong woman, as is your wife. So you're used to it. But most men are not. And they don't accept this, or they accept it, let's say, within certain limitations. All right, now it's my turn, kind of thing. So anyway, I want to thank you for what you are become and what you're teaching.
Thank you. I received that well. And I'm coming into the conversation with a deep respect for you and for your work, and approaching it very differently than if I was having a conversation in my men's circle, or with a man who I was having a discussion like this about. I would have probably asked for. I can talk about balls here, yeah?
Yeah,
I would have asked for, you know, okay, so let's get some more balls into this. Where are you going? What do you want with this conversation? Because I see this as an exchange of me representing some aspect of the masculine, you bringing some aspect of the feminine here, and how do we interact with this? If I was talking to another man directly, it would be much more direct and concrete and clear, potentially calling forth from his emotional state, or in some senses getting more grounded in clarity.
Do you feel like you just want to shake him?
Many men, yes, I do.
Yes.
Often, yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, and you do probably.
Sometimes, yes, yeah, physically or conversationally.
Right.
Yes.
I'm shaking women up all the time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, tell us, what is the new man? What is emerging? We've talked about the problems. We've talked about emotion, which was an important issue. What is emerging? How do you see the immediate and into the next decade future?
As I mentioned at the very beginning, personal responsibility.
Okay.
That takes into consideration family, community, humanity, planet, and working expansively in this way. That when a man, modern man, can practice personal responsibility, he owns every action. That when he does something in the world, recognizes the impact that it has. Because we can be very strong with the things that we do in the world. Even something in like throwing a piece of trash on the street is as radical and inconceivable as you or I would see this, happens thousands of times a day in a small town, and multiply that times the world. Then you look at within the family scope, how to treat his partner, whether it's a woman or a man in this capacity, but with respect, with support, and not that a partner needs it, but I had a conversation about allowing. And like I allow space for my partner, and I support her to thrive and to grow as much as she can, and sometimes that means me stepping back, because my personality and my way of doing things is forward in direction, and if I want to support and allow her to be there, it's not that I have to diminish myself, but how can I point the light towards her power, like so that she recognizes what's possible inside herself because of her conditioning.
That's a really important point, that little word, I don't need to diminish myself. This is something women need to hear about too. You don't need to diminish yourself to allow and to listen and to enjoy the difference of the other.
Yes, and you also touched a key word, listening. That an emotionally mature and responsible man learns to listen. My wife and I, we wrote our own wedding vows, and one of mine to hers was to listen beyond your words. I'm still working on it, but it's an important step to listen beyond the words, to sense everything that is being said that's there.
Okay, in the meantime, right now, present, in the woman there's this whole ebullition, what do you say, this boiling, bubbling explosion inside of all of us that doesn't quite know where we're going, what to do, but it must do something, which is perhaps a little bit of a difference from what is expected of us. We're more receptive, let's say. But woman is becoming more doing. This is with the change of generational changes and as I say, the present moment. So we're like this. There's a certain amount of frustration, which sometimes comes out as aggression.
Yes.
And this is why they say that we have a male side, which always pushes my button, because women do not have a male side. We have our yang side, which is not male. Now, men are coming from my perspective, and you correct me, please, are coming from this, seem to be coming from this perspective of so much is happening, I need to respect women, so therefore I diminish myself, therefore I put myself aside, I become feminine because I have to incorporate this stupid feminine side, which is the same thing. You do not have your feminine side, you have a yin side, which is wholly male. Even gays, you know, or lesbians, whatever. This yin-yang, male-female thing is still very mixed up. So, what is man experiencing at the moment from your perspective? For me, I would say the woman is frustrated, and this frustration is leading to a creative action or creative move.
In my experience of it, I feel guilt and shame because I see the impact of greed, oppression, violence, manipulation that has created the world that we are in now, and that this wave of feminism, this wave of aggression that comes back, in my experience comes, like I said, guilt and like, oof, wow, yes, we really screwed things up in this way, in diminishing our emotional capacity, in oppression, and just looking in the history, even in terms of the very logistical things like women's right to vote and in control of her own body, and then pay scales and all of these very modern things that are really being brought up to light. Like, if these material world things are so obvious, what are the deeper layers of masculine dominance that have, wow, like I'm really curious of what the next layers of this stuff are going to come about.
I'm sad. I'm sure it shows all over my face. I'm sad at what you said about guilt and shame, because I believe that we are where we are, and it's both of our faults. We have exploited and used our bodies and men, whether it was first men's intention, whether they have a larger say in this, a bigger voice, the laws and everything seems to be the men who are doing all these things, but women have lent themselves to be done to, and many women still hide behind this the man is going to take care of me bit, and it's his fault. I would say it's a joint thing, and I really think we need to change our minds about this. And I don't want men to feel guilty and shame.
If you asked the question to an emotionally mature, awakened woman, how do you feel about the manipulation and use of your bodies and sexuality that has created this paradigm with men?
She would not see.
She wouldn't say guilt and shame?
No, she would say that she would still blame the man. Women love blaming the outside. Men are more philosophical.
So I answered from my personal space. If we extrapolate that outward, and I could answer for the male population, which I don't claim to do in any way, I would say that this feels like an attack, and my response is going to be to defend my territory.
Okay.
That you coming at me, so look at your part in this. You have used sexuality, you have used child rearing, other things against me that have pushed me into the place where I am in the world. And so therefore I have to become defensive and territorial because it comes across as an attack against. I feel like I've been doing what I need to do to take care of my family and the world. This is what I feel called to do.
Exactly. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. And would probably, if I were a man, probably react the same way. I've had a couple of interesting experiences when the groups have been larger, when we've had more men participants, of forgiveness. And we have done some processes which have been so incredibly touching. And for me, being a woman, the most touching with the men is like when a woman asks for forgiveness for what her part in the situation that we're in, and when a man asks for forgiveness, and when they offer their hearts, and when a woman offers their heart, there is such a tremendous depth and passion. The men move me to tears, and it has been so beautiful. And they're not coming necessarily from guilt, but we've talked about the subject before. So that the guilt is kind of the immediate response, and the shame. But after that there is a sobering down of, hey, wait, let's look at this.
Sure. Which
I think is what we need to do, and this is the purpose of this talk and our meeting, which I hope will not be the last. To begin to change the beliefs, the conclusions that we have established about one another, about the relationship, about our roles, while maintaining our essential difference as spirit, soul incarnated in a female body, and as a female body incarnated through this emotional explosive self. Thank you, David, so much for what you're doing. Who you are. Thank you all.